Shakespeare? I'm William Shakespeare?
Howdy, my fellow time travelers. Was William Shakespeare Italian? The answer may seem easy, but there are so many theories and conspiracies about his identity that trying to answer this question can turn into a real tempest, or a battle like the one portrayed in Coriolanus. There is one conspiracy theory that calls Shakespeare's authorship into question, raised by those who argue that someone other than William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon wrote the works attributed to him. Who was this person? According to the most eccentric breed of anti-Stratfordians, Shakespeare, or better, Michele Agnolo Florio, whose mother's last name was Coriolanus, which happens to mean Shakespeare in Italian. In 1927, an Italian journalist, Santi Palladino, found an old book in his father's library entitled The Second Fruits, signed by a certain Michele Agnolo Florio. Reading it, he became more and more astonished and discovered that many sentences were identical to those of the works of William Shakespeare. This book was published in 1549, even before the birth of the English poet, which took place on April 23, 1564. After this discovery, some thought that it was a case of plagiarism, whereby Shakespeare would have come to know the book and use many of the phrases in Florio's book. But, of course, the explanation, like the entire biography of the playwright, is not so easy. That Bunny will bring the story of willpower to you today.
How could the son of an illiterate glover manage to possess the immense classical culture that Shakespeare demonstrates in his plays? It doesn't mean that it's impossible for the son of a glovemaker to become a poet, writer, or playwright, because writing doesn't require much more than a sensitivity and knowledge of the human soul, and of course good grammar. But the mystery of Shakespeare's identity is deeper. William seems to be a ghost, not only capable of moving and surprising you, but he is a profound connoisseur not only of foreign languages, places, and customs, but also of law and medicine. Shakespeare's plays reveal an extraordinary age-old experience. Shakespeare seemed to have hunting, falconry, and other sports knowledge as well as court etiquette. How could he so faithfully describe the places and customs of the Italian cities in which many plays are set? More than a third, 15 to be exact, of the 37 Shakespearean plays are in fact set in Italy. Well, perhaps he traveled, but how could he? The third of 8 children of John Shakespeare, an alderman and successful glovemaker, originally from Snitterfield, and Mary Arden, the daughter of an affluent landowning farmer, born in Stratford-upon-Avon, without a precise date of birth and no education. There isn't a shred of evidence proving William Shakespeare was educated at King's New School in Stratford. In a short period of time, he became an expert of Italian daily life, customs, and traditions, and was able to use Italian sources for many of his plays, because they had often been translated. Like in the case of the source for Othello. It's based on a novella by the 16th century Italian poet, dramatist, and prose writer Geraldo Cinzio, the Ecotomithi, a collection of tales published in 1565. While investigating the life of Michele Agnolo Florio, the Italian journalist Palladino discovered that he was born in Messina to the doctor Giovanni Florio and the noblewoman Guglielma Coriolanus, which is Wilhelmina Shakespeare in English. He fled to Treviso with his family because he was a Calvinist and lived part of his life escaping religious persecutions in Palermo, the Aeolian Islands, and Messina. Then he and his family moved to North Italy. He studied in Venice, Padua, and Mantua, traveling a lot and visiting Denmark, Greece, Spain, and Austria. He became a highly educated humanist, sought after as a tutor by the richest families in Europe, and, thanks to his friendship with Giordano Bruno, who had good relations with the Counts of Pembroke and Southampton. In 1588 he reached London, where he was hired as an Italian language tutor for the future Queen, Elizabeth I. Not only did Michele Agnolo have a mother called Wilhelmina, but also a cousin named William in Stratford, who died prematurely. What was Michele Agnolo's childhood like? He immediately turned out to be a child prodigy, gifted with great genius and passionate about reading. At the age of 16, he obtained the gymnasium diploma in Latin, Greek, and history, which was very young, and confirmed his talents. He wrote a comedy in a dialect entitled Tantu Trafficu Pinienti, which years later became one of the most popular Shakespeare comedies, Much Ado About Nothing. This Shakespearean comedy is one of the most farcical comedies, with the major part of the humor coming from slapstick and mistaken identity. In addition, there are idioms and double meanings typical of the Messina slang. In this comedy, the commander of the Carob Guards addressed Don Pedro, Prince of Aragon, and answered one of his questions with a very Sicilian expression, present only in Sicilian slang, that only a Sicilian would understand, which only recently entered common Italian language. Mizzica eccellenza, translated, means, "Wow, Your Excellency." But Much Ado About Nothing is not only a comedy, it's funny and it has a happy ending, for sure, but there is much more. Many critics have noted that the plot of Much Ado About Nothing shares significant elements with that of Romeo and Juliet. In the 16th century, stories of lovers deceived into falsely believing in each other were common in northern Italy. In particular, these kind of comedies originated in ancient Greece, and the greatest samples were two plays by Plautus, the Menechmi and the Bacchanus, which became the sources of another Shakespearean comedy, the Comedy of Errors. Due to his father's religious beliefs, Michele Agnolo, or Shakespeare if you prefer, was no longer safe due to the Inquisition. He was first sent to Valtellina, and then to Milan, Padua, Verona, Faenza, and Venice. He also had time to return to Messina, but his stay in the City of the Strait did not last long. At the age of 21, Michele Agnolo began his personal world tour. He stayed first in Athens, where he was a teacher, then Denmark, Austria, France, and Spain. Returning once again to Treviso, Italy, he fell in love with Giulietta. But the story between the two ended in tragedy, with the kidnapping for religious reasons and the subsequent death of the latter. Shocked by the death of his beloved, Michele Agnolo moved to Venice, but after his father was also killed for the same reasons, he decided to save himself by moving to London. It is perhaps here that Michele Agnolo Florio changed his identity and became William Shakespeare. It would explain why the only surviving literary manuscript in Shakespeare's handwriting, the Book of Sir Thomas More, a play based on the rise and fall of Thomas More, a Tudor lawyer and polymath who was sentenced to death for refusing to recognize Henry VIII as supreme head of the Church of England, which he wrote as a moving plea for the plight of immigrants. On the 4th of February 1927, in the magazine L'Impero, The Empire in English, the Italian journalist Palladino published the article, "The Great Tragic Playwright Shakespeare Could Be Italian," revealing that Michele Agnolo Florio, son of Giovanni, was the true identity of William Shakespeare. This news was so feared and indigestible for the Anglo-Saxons that Winston Churchill, during a visit to Rome, asked Benito Mussolini to erase all traces. Mussolini, after the meeting, ordered the immediate closure of the National Shakespearean Academy in Reggio Calabria that was created by the followers of Palladino's theory, and silence fell on Shakespeare's Italic origins. The theory of the Sicilian origin of the bard was taken up by Enrico Besta, a professor of the history of Italian law at the University of Palermo in 1950. On the 8th of April 2000, in an article by Richard Owen entitled "Was William Shakespeare Sicilian?" published in the Times of London, the Coriolanus theory is analyzed and supported by Owen. This is one of the most astonishing parts of the article, which went around the world and aroused considerable criticism and appreciation. The mystery of how and why Shakespeare knew so much about Italy and put so much Italy into his works has been solved by a retired Sicilian academic. The question is that Shakespeare was not English at all, but Italian. Subsequently, in 2002, the retired Sicilian professor and author of the book, Shakespeare Was Italian, Martino Juvara da Ispica, based on his own research, claimed William Shakespeare was Michele Agnolo Florio, born in Messina in 1564. In 2008, the Italo-Canadian literary editor Lamberto Tassinari published a 378-page book, Shakespeare? Which makes a case, similar to Juvara's, that the stage name of John Florio, and that both Shakespeare's fondness for Italian settings and his knowledge of Italy exceeded what is credible for the historical William Shakespeare from Stratford. However, in a public discussion in 2011, Tassinari insisted that John Florio The well-attested North Italian-born father of Michele Florio was the true Shakespeare, and must not be equated with the Sicilian Coriolanus, whom he calls an ill-documented phantom, elusive cousin of John Florio. The Mexican writer Jesus Covarrubias, author of The Man with the Glove, wrote in the novel that William Shakespeare, born in Casatico near Mantua, a city in the north of Italy, on April 30th, 1564, was William Shakespeare. Having lost his mother, little William was taken to England, where his father, Giovanni or John, a glover by profession, lived. Of course, this is a novel, and many of the facts narrated may be the result of an invention that is not based on scientific data, but according to the editor of the book, Martha Canfield, who published this book after the writer's death, claimed that The Man with the Glove works on two levels, one for historical reconstruction and one for entertainment. But undoubtedly the years from 1585 to 1592 are dark years as far as Shakespeare's biography is concerned, and it could be a plausible hypothesis that the book suggests, since during this period the author of Hamlet may have returned to Italy. First of all, in Hamlet, to me a tragedy of consciousness, appear the surnames of two Danish students, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who attended the University of Padua, and whom Michele Florio knew. That's not all. In Hamlet, there are many proverbs published by the Calvinist Michele Florio in the booklet entitled The Second Fruits. In The Merchant of Venice, the local color is amazing. Exact seafaring expressions are placed in the mouth of Salanio and Salerio when talking about the ferry that connects Venice to the mainland. He gives the name of Belmont, or Montebello, a suburb of Venice, and Padua, to which the characters Portia and Nerissa traveled. Again, the bard reveals a thorough knowledge of Venetian legislation at the time, completely different from that enforced in England, which few English knew of at the time. There's more. The master, Bellario, mentioned in the text is similar to a person who really existed, and was very famous in the Padua legal world, Professor Ottanello Descalzio. It's also known that William Shakespeare attended a club in London. In that club's register, he is not among the members, while Michele Florio is. Shakespeare also knew Roman history well, and knew that Pompeo had stayed in Messina in 36 BC. In the tragedy, Antonio and Cleopatra, knowing these historical facts, he speaks of Pompeo's house in Messina. In addition, Italy is often present even in those plays that do not have Italian settings. In The Tempest, the character Prospero broods on his past life as Duke of Milan, from where providence and magic bring him his usurping brother Antonio, his ally Alonso, king of Naples, along with his brother and son. They are traveling back to Italy after the wedding of Alonso's daughter to the king of Tunis, and are caught up in a storm that Prospero sailed into. Shipwrecked on a mysterious isle, they set to conspiring, as Italian courtiers always do on the Jacobean stage. All's Well That Ends Well is set in France, but in its second scene we learn that Florence and Siena are at war, that venturesome young Frenchmen are traveling to the Italian wars. In The Winter's Tale, the miraculously lifelike statue of Hermione is said to have been made by that rare Italian master, Giulio Romano. In the end, if we don't make any assumptions, we can just say that Italy figured vividly, not just in Shakespeare's mind, but in the minds of many of his characters. Andrea Camilleri, beloved creator of Inspector Montalbano, who died at the age of 93 in 2019, brought to the Elizabethan Theatre in Rome, The Globe, a play entitled Too Much Traffic for Nothing, where William Shakespeare becomes the Sicilian Michele Florio. Camilleri's comedy jokingly represents the hypothesis of the Italian origins of the bard. Although no one is known to have contested Shakespeare's authorship during his lifetime, controversy has swirled since at least the 19th century, when Henry James said that he was haunted by the conviction that the Divine William is the biggest and most successful fraud ever practiced on a patient world. And later in his own career, James described the author of The Tempest unforgettably as the monster and magician of 1,000 masks. Later, Charlie Chaplin said, "In the work of the greatest geniuses, humble beginnings will reveal themselves somewhere, but one cannot trace the slightest sign of them in Shakespeare. I am not concerned with who wrote the works of Shakespeare, but I can hardly think it was the Stratford boy. Whoever wrote them had an aristocratic attitude." But James and Chaplin weren't alone in raising doubts about William Shakespeare's identity. Sigmund Freud manifested this point of view twice in his life. The first time he wrote in an autobiographical study published in 1927, "I no longer believe that William Shakespeare, the actor from Stratford, was the author of the works that have been ascribed to him." And then, during the speech accepting the Goethe Prize in 1930, he stated that it is undeniably painful to all of us that even now we do not know who was the author of the comedies, tragedies, and sonnets of Shakespeare, whether it was in fact the untutored son of the provincial citizen of Stratford, who attained a modest position as an actor in London. In this crusade, in search of Shakespeare's identity, we find other famous personalities, such as Mark Twain, Walt Whitman, Orson Welles, and even the Tony Award-winning British theatre director who established Canada's Stratford Festival, Sir William Tyrone Guthrie. The latest news about Shakespeare is only a few days old. On October 14th, 2020, when a rare copy of Shakespeare's first folio sold for $9.98 million, the collection of 36 plays, published shortly after the playwright's death, is one of only 5 complete copies still in private hands. The first folio is considered among the most important collections of literature in the English language. It contains 18 works that had not previously appeared in print, and would have otherwise been lost to history, including Macbeth and Twelfth Night. The item was purchased by book dealer and antiquarian Stephen Lowenthal, who described his purchase as the Holy Grail of books. So, what do you think? Was Shakespeare an Italian refugee? Leave a comment now, your opinion matters. And you might receive an answer that will take you back in time. Time machine sound. Cool, right? If you want to become a time traveler, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more strange stories told by an alien and her imaginary friend, a pair that otherwise can't be found anywhere. If you would like to support us on Patreon, you can find the link in the description as well as our store. In our store, you can get an exclusive Halloween-themed t-shirt, sticker, and mug. And of course, stay safe with a MyStoryYourStory mask.
If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you don't, press thumbs down twice, just to be sure. Take it easy. Peace. Oh, by the way, I'm an alien, but not that kind of alien.
Literary a Hamlet. Michelangelo. God damn it. I know. Sorry. We'll figure that one out later. We'll Google it. Wow, that's a tough one. You gringo ass motherfucker. That's exactly how I said it. We're not gonna debate that. That's what I was gonna do, and then I fucked it up real bad. Pardon me. My tongue don't wiggle like that.